Maya Thompson's hands trembled as she carried the perfectly plated ribeye through the dining room of Le Bernardin Rouge. Knowing it was yesterday's leftovers disguised as a fresh meal for the black man in the hoodie they'd shoved by the kitchen doors. She'd heard the chef laughing about it, watched the hostess seat him at the worst table, witnessed every small cruelty designed to make him feel unwelcome in this temple of white tablecloths and whispered prejudices. The note she'd hidden in her apron pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 3 words that could destroy her career. That's yesterday's leftovers. When she slipped it to him while pretending to adjust his water glass, Maya had no idea she'd just handed that warning to Elijah King, a billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing and had come hunting for exactly this kind of discrimination. All she knew was that somebody finally needed to tell the truth. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The evening rain had just stopped when Elijah King pushed through the heavy glass doors of Le Bernardin Rouge. Water droplets still clung to his dark hoodie, and his worn sneakers squeaked against the marble floor. The restaurant stretched before him like a cathedral of wealth, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over white tablecloths, each table adorned with flowers that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. The hostess, a thin woman named Victoria with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, looked up from her reservation book. Her practiced smile faltered immediately. Her eyes traveled from Elijah's face down to his casual attire, lingering on the frayed edge of his hoodie sleeve. The calculation was obvious in her expression. This man didn't belong here. "Can I help you?" Victoria's tone suggested she'd rather do anything but help. Her fingers tightened around the reservation book, as if protecting it from contamination. "Table for one," Elijah said quietly, his deep voice carrying a calm that seemed at odds with his appearance. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have a reservation?" "I don't need one." The hostess let out a small laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be funny. "Sir, this is Le Bernardin Rouge. We're fully booked for weeks. Perhaps you're looking for somewhere else? There's a nice casual dining place 2 blocks down." Elijah remained still, his dark eyes steady on hers. "I like a table here. Tonight." Something in his tone made Victoria hesitate. She glanced around the dining room, where several patrons had already noticed the interaction. An elderly couple in pearls and a 3-piece suit whispered to each other, their eyes fixed on Elijah with undisguised disapproval. Victoria's jaw tightened. The last thing the restaurant needed was a scene. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. "Follow me." She led him through the main dining room, past tables positioned to showcase the stunning city views, past the intimate corners where deals worth millions were sealed over wine. She walked him all the way to the back, near the swinging kitchen doors where servers rushed in and out, creating a constant flow of movement and noise. She gestured to a small table pressed against the wall, the kind they reserved for solo diners they wanted to forget about. "Your server will be with you shortly," Victoria said, already turning away before Elijah had even sat down. He settled into the chair without complaint, his broad shoulders relaxed despite the obvious slight. The kitchen doors swung open every few seconds, releasing bursts of heat and the clatter of dishes. Other diners glanced his way, some with curiosity, most with barely concealed disdain. Maya Thompson had been watching from her station near the bar. She'd seen this dance before, the way certain customers were shuffled to the worst tables, the way the staff would suddenly become too busy to provide proper service. But something about this man's quiet dignity as he sat alone at that terrible table made her chest tighten with anger. Maya was 26, had been working at Le Bernardin Rouge for 2 years, and was one of only 3 black employees in the entire restaurant. The other 2 worked in the kitchen, hidden from view. She'd fought hard for her position as a server, enduring countless mistakes with her schedule, being assigned the worst sections, and overhearing comments that were just quiet enough to deny, but loud enough to hurt. She watched as Bradley, the server assigned to that section, deliberately avoided looking toward Elijah's table. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Elijah sat patiently, his hands folded on the table, studying the room with an expression that gave nothing away. Maya couldn't stand it anymore. She grabbed a menu and water pitcher, ignoring Bradley's surprised look as she walked past him. "Good evening, sir," she said, setting down the leather-bound menu with careful precision. "My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Elijah looked up at her, and for the first time since entering, he smiled. It was small but genuine. "Thank you, Maya. Would you like to start with something to drink? We have an excellent wine selection. Just water for now, and I'll have the ribeye, medium rare, with the seasonal vegetables." Maya wrote down his order, noting that he hadn't even glanced at the menu or asked about prices. The ribeye was one of their most expensive dishes. "Excellent choice. I'll have that right out for you." She turned toward the kitchen, her mind already shifting to the controlled chaos that awaited behind those doors. The kitchen at Le Bernardin Rouge was its own ecosystem, with executive chef Richard Beaumont ruling it like a small kingdom. Richard was talented, there was no denying that, but he was also cruel in the casual way of those who'd never been challenged. As Maya entered the kitchen and clipped Elijah's order to the rail, she heard Richard's voice before she saw him. "Table 12 wants the ribeye," she said, using Elijah's table number. Richard glanced at the order, then looked through the kitchen window at Elijah's table. His thin lips curved into an unpleasant smile. "That guy? In the hoodie?" "Yes, chef." Richard turned to his sous chef, Marcus, a younger white man who laughed at all of Richard's jokes. "You see this? Now, we're letting anyone in here." He grabbed the order ticket, studying it with exaggerated interest. "Tell you what, we've got that ribeye from yesterday's service. Still good enough. He won't know the difference." Maya's stomach dropped. "Chef, that's what?" Richard's voice turned sharp, his pale blue eyes narrowing. "You got something to say, Thompson?" The kitchen fell quiet. Everyone knew that tone. Maya had seen servers fired for less than questioning Richard's decisions. She needed this job. Her younger brother, Terrell, was counting on her to help with his college applications, his tutoring, everything their mom couldn't afford on her own. "No, chef," she said quietly. "That's what I thought. Yesterday's ribeye, Marcus. Make it look pretty." Marcus snickered as he moved to the walk-in cooler. Maya stood frozen for a moment, watching as they prepared to serve a paying customer literal leftovers just because of how he looked. The other kitchen staff kept their heads down, some uncomfortable but none willing to speak up. She returned to the dining room, her heart pounding. She could see Elijah from across the room, sitting quietly, occasionally checking his phone. He looked tired but patient, like someone who'd waited for a lot of things in his life. Maya busied herself with other tables, but her mind kept racing. She could stay quiet, keep her job, go home to Terrell, and tell herself she'd done what she had to do. Or she could risk everything for a stranger who'd probably never even know what had almost happened to him. 20 minutes later, Marcus called out, "Order up. Table 12. Maya approached the pass, where the plate sat waiting. To anyone who didn't know better, it looked perfect. The ribeye was artfully arranged, the vegetables colorful and seemingly fresh. Richard watched her with a smirk, waiting to see his little cruelty play out. She picked up the plate, its weight feeling heavier than usual. The walk to Elijah's table seemed endless. Other servers brushed past her, the dining room's conversations creating a steady hum of privilege and contentment. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached. But as she walked, something solidified in her chest. She thought about Terrell, yes, but also about every time she'd been made to feel less than human in this place. Every snide comment, every customer who'd asked for a different server when they saw her approaching, every moment she'd bitten her tongue to keep her dignity and her paycheck. She set the plate down in front of Elijah with practiced grace. "Your ribeye, sir." "Thank you," he said, reaching for his silverware. Maya's hand moved almost without her thinking about it. She had grabbed a cloth napkin from her apron, and as she pretended to adjust his water glass, she pressed it into his hand. Their eyes met for just a moment. She saw surprise flash across his features, but he said nothing. She walked away quickly, her pulse hammering in her ears. She didn't dare look back, didn't dare watch as he unfolded the napkin to read the words she'd hastily scrawled. "That's yesterday's leftovers." From her position by the bar, She watched through the mirror's reflection as Elijah read the note. His expression didn't change. He didn't call out, didn't make a scene. He simply folded the napkin, placed it beside his plate, and pushed the entire dish aside. He didn't touch a single bite. Maya exhaled slowly, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. She watched as Elijah pulled out his phone and began typing something. Her stomach churned. Was he writing a review? Calling the manager? Had she just destroyed her career for nothing? But when Elijah finally stood to leave, he walked directly to her. The dining room seemed to fade away as he approached. He reached into his wallet and handed her cash, $200 for a meal he hadn't eaten. "Thank you for your honesty," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her. Then, louder, for anyone listening, "The service was exceptional." He left without another word, the glass doors closing behind him with a soft whoosh. Maya stood there, holding the bills, feeling like something had just shifted in the universe, though she couldn't say what. Richard appeared from the kitchen, his face flushed with annoyance. What happened? He didn't eat anything. He said he wasn't hungry. Maya lied smoothly, surprised by her own calm. Richard's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't prove anything. "Next time, don't waste my food on people who don't appreciate it." Maya nodded, tucking the money into her apron. She had no idea who Elijah was or if she'd ever see him again. But something told her this wasn't over. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Maya's mood as she pushed through the employee entrance of Le Bernardin Rouge. She'd barely slept, replaying the previous night's events over and over. The $200 sat in her purse like evidence of a crime, both a comfort and a weight. She'd just finished changing into her uniform when David Hartley, the general manager, appeared in the break room doorway. David was the kind of man who smiled with his mouth, but never his eyes, 40-something with premature gray hair that he claimed made him look distinguished. "Maya, my office." Now, the walk to his office felt like a funeral march. She could feel other employees watching, some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't them. David's office was all dark wood and leather, designed to intimidate. He didn't invite her to sit. "I've been reviewing the security footage from last night." He began, his fingers steepled in front of him. "You served table 12. "Yes, sir." The gentleman in the casual attire. "He didn't eat his meal." "No, sir." David leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Did you say something to him? Something that might have upset him?" Maya kept her expression neutral, a skill she perfected over years of service work. "I served him exactly as I would any other customer. That's not what I asked." His voice hardened. "Did you speak to him about anything other than his order?" "I thanked him for coming and wished him a good evening." David's jaw tightened. He knew she was lying, but couldn't prove it. "Maya, you're a good server. But you need to understand that this restaurant has standards. We cater to a certain clientele. Sometimes people wander and who don't quite fit. It's our job to handle those situations delicately." "By serving them yesterday's food?" The words escaped before Maya could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. David's face flushed red, then pale. "I don't know what you think you heard." "I didn't hear anything," Maya said quickly, backtracking. "I was just asking. Hypothetically." David stood, using his height to tower over her. "Let me be very clear. You're already on thin ice, being one of the few diverse hires we've made. Don't give me a reason to reconsider that decision." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Maya nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. "Get to work." David dismissed her. "And Maya? I'll be watching." She left his office with her hands shaking, but her resolve hardening. She'd crossed a line last night, and there was no going back now. The lunch shift started slowly, the usual mix of business meetings and ladies who lunch. Maya tried to focus on her tables, but she kept glancing toward the door. She didn't know why she expected him to return, but somehow she knew he would. At 2:15, he walked in. Same hoodie, same quiet confidence, but this time Maya noticed details she'd missed before. The quality of his watch, barely visible under his sleeve, the way he carried himself like someone used to being in charge, just choosing not to advertise it. Victoria was at the host stand again. Her smile became physically painful to witness. "Oh, you again. I'd like a table in Maya's section," Elijah said calmly. Victoria's eyes darted to where Maya stood. We don't take requests for specific servers. You do today. Something in his tone brooked no argument. Victoria led him to Maya's section, though she chose the worst table again, this time near the bathroom hallway. Elijah sat without complaint. Maya approached, trying to keep her expression professional even as her heart raced. "Welcome back, sir." "Hello, Maya." He smiled slightly. "I'm hoping today's meal will be fresher." She couldn't help but smile back. "I'll do my best to ensure that." "Just water to start?" "Actually, let's see your wine list." Maya brought him the leather-bound wine menu, watching as he studied it with obvious knowledge. At a nearby table, she heard a woman in diamonds whisper to her companion, "Why do they let people like that in here? It ruins the ambience." Her companion, a man in an expensive suit, laughed. "Probably saved up for months just to eat here once. Watch, he'll order the cheapest thing and water." Maya saw Elijah's jaw tighten slightly. He'd heard them too. When she returned for his order, he said clearly, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "I'll have the 2015 Chateau Margaux." Maya's pen stopped moving. "That was a $3,000 bottle of wine." "Of course, sir." "Excellent choice." The whispers started immediately. The woman in diamonds looked stunned. Her companion shifted uncomfortably. Maya retrieved the wine, but when she reached the cellar, she found Richard there with Marcus, both grinning. "Your friend wants the Margaux?" Richard asked mockingly. "Here, give him this." He handed her a different bottle, decent wine, but worth maybe $300. "He won't know the difference. We'll charge him for the cheap one, save him the embarrassment when his card gets declined." Maya took the bottle, her mind racing. In the dining room, she performed the wine service flawlessly, even as she knew she was perpetuating fraud. Elijah examined the bottle, his expression unreadable. He had to know it was wrong. The label was completely different from what he'd ordered. "This is excellent," he said after tasting it. "Please give my compliments to your sommelier." The meal proceeded with painful precision. The kitchen, on David's direct orders, served Elijah properly this time, but she could feel the hostility radiating from every interaction. When he asked for the check, David himself brought it over. "I hope everything was to your satisfaction," David said, his tone suggesting he hoped the opposite. "The wine was interesting," Elijah replied. "Not quite what I ordered, but educational nonetheless." David's smile faltered. "I'm sure you're mistaken. The 2015 Chateau Margaux has a very distinctive bottle shape," Elijah said conversationally. "Different from the 2018 Burgundy you actually served. Though I'm curious why you'd make that substitution. The Margaux is actually in stock. I can see it in your cellar display from here." The nearby tables had gone quiet, listening. David's face cycled through several colors. "Some kind of misunderstanding," David managed. "We'll correct the bill immediately." "No need," Elijah said, pulling out the same black metal credit card Maya had glimpsed the night before. "Charge me for what I ordered. I believe in paying full price for education." David took the card, his hand slightly unsteady. When he returned with the receipt, his demeanor had shifted to something more cautious. The card had clearly been approved without issue. As Elijah signed, he said quietly but clearly, "You know, in my experience, restaurants that substitute wines without telling customers often have other ethical flexibility. Makes one wonder what else might be substituted." He stood, leaving another generous tip for Maya. As he passed her, he murmured, "Truth always costs something, but it pays more in the end." After he left, the dining room buzzed with speculation. The woman in diamonds looked embarrassed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. David retreated to his office, and Maya heard him making urgent phone calls. That's when Jamal approached her. Jamal Washington was 53, had been bussing tables at the restaurant for 5 years, and was the only other black employee who worked front of house. He usually kept his head down, did his job, and went home to his family. "That man," Jamal said quietly, pretending to help her clear a table. "He's somebody." "What do you mean?" "The way he carries himself. The way he knew about the wine. That wasn't some random guy off the street." Jamal glanced around, then added, "And that black card? That's not just a credit card. That's an invitation-only card for people with serious money. Like buy a building money." Maya's mind reeled. Then why is he? Testing, Jamal interrupted. He's testing something. Or someone. Maybe everyone. He picked up a water glass, his voice dropping even lower. Be careful, Maya. When rich folks play games, it's working people who get hurt. But even as Jamal warned her, Maya felt something stirring in her chest. It wasn't fear, it was hope. For the first time since she'd started working at Le Bernardin Rouge, someone with power was seeing what she saw, experiencing what she experienced. That evening, as her shift ended, she found David waiting by the employee exit again. He asked for your section specifically. David said without preamble. What did you say to him last night? Nothing inappropriate. David stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now. If he comes back, you don't serve him. You're reassigned to kitchen prep for the next week. Kitchen prep isn't my job. It is if I say it is. His smile was sharp. Unless you'd prefer to find employment elsewhere? Maya thought about Terrell, about the college applications, about the rent due next week. She nodded once, but as she walked to her car in the rain, she pulled out her phone and did something she'd never done before. She opened a voice recording app and spoke clearly. September 15th. David Hartley just threatened my job for serving a black customer who asked for my section. He's removing me from the floor for a week as punishment. This is Maya Thompson, employee ID 4782 at Le Bernardin Rouge. She saved the file and emailed it to herself. Whatever game was being played, she was going to make sure she had her own cards to play, because something told her Elijah would be back. And when he returned, everything was going to change. The kitchen prep area at Le Bernardin Rouge was a special kind of purgatory. Located in the basement, away from the gleaming surfaces upstairs, it was where vegetables were peeled, stocks were started at dawn, and dreams went to die. Maya stood at a stainless steel counter, mechanically chopping onions for the third straight hour, her eyes burning despite years of practice. Heard you got demoted, said Carlos, one of the prep cooks, not unkindly. He was older, had been there for years, and knew how to keep his head down. What did you do? Tell Hartley his toupee was crooked? Maya managed a small smile. Something like that. It had been 3 days since her reassignment. 3 days of arriving at 5 in the morning instead of noon. 3 days of her hands raw from constant washing and chopping. 3 days of pretending she didn't hear the gossip filtering down from the dining room about the weird guy in the hoodie, who kept coming back and asking for her. He was here again yesterday. Carlos continued, lowering his voice. That black guy asked for you specifically. Hartley told him you were no longer employed here. Maya's knife stopped moving. He said what? Yeah. But get this, the guy just smiled and said, that's interesting considering I saw her car in the employee lot. Then he left without ordering anything. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she resumed chopping. Elijah knew she was still here. He was paying attention. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced around. The supervisor was nowhere in sight, and quickly checked it. A text from Terrell. Sis, counselor says I need to turn in my college essay by Friday. Can you look at it tonight? She texted back a quick of course, and returned to the onions, blinking away tears that weren't entirely from the vegetables. This job, as much as she hated it, was keeping Terrell's dreams alive. She couldn't lose it. Not now. Upstairs, the lunch service was in full swing. The gossip among the servers had reached a fever pitch. Bradley, who'd initially refused to serve Elijah, was holding court by the coffee station. I'm telling you, something's off about that guy, Bradley insisted. Nobody dresses like that and drops $3,000 on wine. He's probably a drug dealer or something. Or maybe, said Jennifer, another server, he's exactly what he looks like. New money trying to prove something. You know how those people are when they finally get a little cash. The casual racism made Jamal's jaw tighten as he quietly refilled water pitchers nearby. He'd been watching, listening, seeing how the entire staff was starting to crack under the strange pressure of Elijah's visits. Some were doubling down on their prejudices. Others were beginning to question things they'd never questioned before. At 2:30, right on schedule, Elijah walked in. This time, something was different. He wasn't alone. A white woman in an expensive suit walked beside him, her bearing screaming lawyer or executive. They spoke quietly as Victoria approached, her face cycling through confusion and alarm. "Table for two," Elijah said calmly. "And I'd like to speak to Maya Thompson. I told you yesterday. She's no longer. She's doing prep work in the basement," Elijah interrupted. "Which is interesting, considering she was your best server by customer satisfaction scores." "I know, because I had someone pull your Yelp reviews. Her name comes up more than any other employee's, always positive." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The woman beside Elijah pulled out her phone and started recording. I'll get the manager," Victoria stammered. David appeared within minutes, his face already flushed. He recognized the woman immediately, Sandra Palmer, a food critic for the Times who could make or break a restaurant with a single review. "Ms. Palmer," he gushed, ignoring Elijah entirely. "What an honor. Had we known you were coming." "I'm here as a friend of Mr. King," Sandra said coolly. "He tells me interesting things about your service standards." David's eyes darted to Elijah, clearly trying to process the name King and coming up empty. "I assure you, our service is impeccable." "Then you won't mind if Maya Thompson serves us," Elijah said. "Unless there's a reason she's been hidden in the basement." The dining room had gone quiet. Several regular patrons were watching with interest, including Harold Morrison, one of the restaurant's primary investors, who'd been having lunch at his usual corner table. Harold was in his 60s, silver-haired, and had the kind of quiet power that came from old money. He set down his wine glass and watched the scene unfold. David's smile looked painful. "Of course. I'll get her immediately." Maya was elbow-deep in potato peels when David burst into the prep room. "You, upstairs. Now, and make yourself presentable." She washed her hands, confused and wary. "But you said—" "I don't care what I said. There's a critic up there, and your friend specifically requested you." His voice dropped to a hiss. "You say one word out of line, and you won't just be fired. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Maya changed quickly back into her server uniform, her mind racing. A critic? Had Elijah arranged this? When she emerged into the dining room, the afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, and she had to blink against the brightness after days in the basement. Elijah stood when he saw her, a gesture of respect that made several patrons stare. "Maya," he said warmly, "I'm glad you're still here. This is Sandra Palmer." Sandra extended her hand. "I've heard wonderful things about you." Maya shook her hand, acutely aware of the entire restaurant watching. "Thank you. May I show you to your table?" She led them to a prime spot, not because David had assigned it, but because the elderly couple who usually sat there had left early, shooting disapproving looks at Elijah as they went. As Maya handed out menus, she noticed Harold Morrison had moved to a closer table, pretending to read his phone while obviously eavesdropping. "Tell me," Sandra said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "is it standard practice here to reassign your best servers to prep work?" "I couldn't comment on management decisions," Maya replied carefully. Very diplomatic. Sandra studied the menu. "What do you recommend?" "The sea base is excellent today," Maya said, then dropped her voice slightly. "Actually fresh. I watched them prepare it this morning." Elijah's eyes glinted with understanding. "And the vegetables?" "Cut this morning as well." "By me, actually." "Then we'll have 2 sea base specials," Elijah said. "And Maya, take your time. We're in no rush." As Maya walked to the kitchen, she heard whispers erupting at various tables. Richard was at the pass when she entered, his face red with anger. "So you're back," he snarled. "Don't think this changes anything. You're still—" "Richard." David appeared beside him. "Ms. Palmer's meal is to be perfect." "Understood." Richard's jaw clenched, but he nodded. As he began preparing the dishes, Maya heard him mutter to Marcus, "Can't wait until this all blows over and we can get back to normal." "Normal," Marcus agreed, then louder, for Maya's benefit, "when certain people knew their place." Maya kept her expression neutral, but she memorized every word. The meal service proceeded with exaggerated perfection. Every dish that emerged from the kitchen was flawless, every interaction so formally correct as to be almost parody. Sandra took notes throughout, occasionally asking Maya pointed questions about wine pairings, preparation methods, and the restaurant's history. Halfway through the meal, Harold Morrison stood and approached their table. "Excuse the interruption," he said smoothly. "I couldn't help but notice Ms. Palmer was dining with us today." "Harold Morrison," Sandra acknowledged. "You're an investor here, aren't you?" "Minority stake," Harold admitted, his eyes shifting to Elijah. "And you are?" "Elijah King." Elijah stood, extending his hand. Harold shook it, and Maya saw the exact moment recognition flickered in the older man's eyes. "King, as in King Enterprises?" "That's right." The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Harold Morrison's face went pale, then flushed. King Enterprises was a massive investment firm, known for hostile takeovers and turning failing businesses into gold mines. More importantly, they had enough capital to buy Loup Bernardin Rouge 10 times over. I wasn't aware you dined here," Harold managed. "Recently started," Elijah said mildly. "The service has been educational." Harold's eyes darted to Maya, then to David, who had appeared at the edge of their conversation like a moth to flame. "David, a word?" They retreated to the corner, where Maya could see Harold gesticulating urgently, while David shook his head, looking confused and increasingly panicked. Sandra leaned back in her chair. "Well, this is more interesting than I expected." "How did you know him?" Maya asked Elijah quietly while refilling his water. "Harold? We've crossed paths in business. He once tried to lowball me on a property deal. Thought because I was young and black, I wouldn't know what it was worth." Elijah's smile was sharp. He learned otherwise. The rest of the meal passed in a strange tension. Other diners kept glancing over, whispers spreading from table to table. Maya caught fragments. "King Enterprises, worth billions. Why is he dressed like that?" As they finished, Elijah asked for the check. David practically ran to deliver it personally, his entire demeanor transformed into obsequious deference. "Mr. King, please, this meal is complimentary. We're honored to have you." "I pay for my meals," Elijah interrupted. "Though I'm curious about your pricing structure. Yesterday, you told me Maya was no longer employed here. Today, she's serving me. Do you often lie to your customers?" David's mouth worked soundlessly. Sandra continued recording. "It was a miscommunication," David stammered. "Like the wine substitution was a miscommunication? Or moving me to the worst tables? Or your chef serving me yesterday's food on my first visit?" Each word landed like a hammer blow. The entire dining room was listening now, all pretense of privacy abandoned. "I don't know what you've been told," David began. "I haven't been told anything," Elijah said, standing. "I've experienced it. Every slight, every insult, every degradation you put your customers through based on how they look." He pulled out his black card. "Charge the meal. Full price." As David processed the payment with shaking hands, Harold Morrison approached again. "Mr. King, perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No need," Elijah said. "I think I've seen everything I need to see." He turned to Maya, pressing another generous tip into her hand. "Thank you for your honesty from the beginning." Then, louder, "It's rare to find someone with integrity in a place so devoted to facades." The next morning, Le Bernardin Rouge was in full crisis mode. Harold Morrison had called an emergency meeting with the restaurant's investor group, and rumors were flying. Maya arrived for her prep shift to find the kitchen in chaos, with Richard screaming at anyone within range. "I don't care who he is." Richard was shouting. "This is my kitchen. I run it how I see fit." "Not anymore," David said, appearing in the doorway. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "As of this morning, Mr. Morrison has ordered a full review of all staff and procedures." "Maya, you're back on the floor. Full schedule." Maya blinked in surprise. "What? You heard me. And you're taking the VIP section today." David's expression suggested he was eating glass with every word. "Mr. Morrison's orders." As Maya changed back into her server uniform, for what felt like the 100th time that week, she overheard Bradley and Jennifer in the break room. "This is insane," Jennifer was saying. "One rich guy complains, and suddenly everything changes." "He's not just rich," Bradley replied, scrolling through his phone. "I looked him up. Elijah King built his company from nothing. Started with a food truck, turned it into a restaurant chain, sold it for millions, then got into investment. He's worth like $3 billion now. And he comes here dressed like that. That's the thing. Apparently he does this. There are stories online. He shows up places looking ordinary, sees how he's treated. Last year, he bought a hotel chain after they refused to give him a room. Fired the entire management team. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't random. Elijah had been hunting. The lunch shift started tensely. Every server was on their best behavior, terrified of being the next one caught mistreating a customer. David stalked the floor like a caged animal, watching everything with paranoid intensity. At 2:30, Elijah arrived. But this time, he wasn't dressed down. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. The entire restaurant stopped breathing. Victoria nearly fell over herself, showing him to the best table. The one by the window with the city view, usually reserved for celebrities and politicians. Mr. King, such an honor. I'll wait for Maya, he said simply. Maya approached, trying to hide her nervousness. Elijah looked like a completely different person, yet his eyes were the same, calm, observant, taking in everything. You look more comfortable up here than in the basement, he said. It's been an interesting morning, Maya admitted. I imagine it has. He accepted the menu she offered, but didn't open it. Tell me, Maya, how long have you worked here? 2 years. And in that time, how many black customers do you serve on average? Maya glanced around nervously. David was watching from across the room. Maybe 1 or 2 a month. Out of how many total customers? Hundreds. Interesting statistics. Elijah finally opened the menu. I'll have the tasting menu. And please ask Harold Morrison to join me. I see him lurking by the bar. Harold had indeed been hovering, pretending to examine wine bottles. He approached with the cautious gait of someone walking through a minefield. Elijah, he said, sitting carefully, I think there's been a misunderstanding. 7 times, Elijah interrupted. That's how many times I've dined here now. Would you like to know what I've documented? Systematic racism from your host staff. A kitchen that serves substandard food to anyone they deem unworthy. Management that threatens and demotes employees who show basic human decency. And investors who see it all happening and do nothing. Harold's face was ashen. We had no idea. Don't lie to me, Harold. You eat here 3 times a week. You've seen it. Elijah pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. I have recordings. Videos. Testimonies from former employees who were too scared to speak up before. Your restaurant isn't just discriminatory. It's built on discrimination. What do you want? Harold asked bluntly. Change, Elijah said simply. Real change. Not just surface-level diversity, training nonsense. And if we refuse? Elijah smiled. It wasn't pleasant. I'll buy this place out from under you. I've already had my lawyers looking into it. You're leveraged to the hilt, Harold. 1 bad review from Sandra Palmer, combined with a discrimination lawsuit, and your creditors will be circling like sharks. I'll be there with a checkbook when they do. Maya tried to disappear as she served their drinks, but Elijah caught her eye. Stay, please. This concerns you. She stood awkwardly as Elijah continued. Here's my offer. Fire David Hartley and Richard Beaumont immediately. Promote Maya to senior server and give her a say in hiring practices. Implement real diversity training and hiring quotas. Or I go public with everything. You can't just, Harold started. I can and I will. Elijah pulled out a folder thick with documents. 14 former employees ready to testify about discrimination. 3 pending EEOC complaints that you've been suppressing. Health code violations Richard has been bribing inspectors to ignore. Would you like me to continue? The color drained from Harold's face entirely. Around them, the restaurant continued its lunch service, unaware that its future was being decided at this sunny window table. I need to discuss this with the other investors, Harold said weakly. You have until end of business today. Elijah stood. Oh, and Harold? That property deal 5 years ago. The one where you thought you were being clever? I bought the buildings on either side of yours last month. Your rent's about to triple unless you play ball. Harold left without another word, his gait unsteady. Maya stood frozen, unsure what to do or say. Sit, Elijah said gently. You're not on duty right now. I can't, David will. David won't do anything. He's about 12 hours away from being unemployed. Elijah's expression softened. You risked everything to tell me the truth that first night. What? Maya thought about Terrell, about dignity, about all the moments she'd bitten her tongue. Because somebody had to, that's what I thought. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Whatever happens here, I want you to call me. I own several restaurants, legitimate ones, where talent is recognized regardless of packaging. Before Maya could respond, the sound of raised voices came from the kitchen. Richard had apparently been informed of the ultimatum and was not taking it well. They could hear him screaming about his artistic integrity and how he wouldn't be dictated to by some uppity. The word he used made the entire dining room go silent. Elijah stood slowly. Excuse me for a moment. He walked into the kitchen with the measured pace of someone who had all the time in the world. Maya followed, unable to help herself, as did several other staff members and even a few curious diners. Richard was in full meltdown mode, his face purple with rage. And I don't care how much money he has. This is my kitchen. Not anymore, Elijah said quietly. Richard whirled to face him. You think you can come in here, throw your weight around? I think, Elijah said, his voice deadly calm, that you're a small, frightened man who's confused cruelty with strength. You've spent years making people feel small because you feel small. But here's the thing about bullies. They only have power as long as everyone else is too scared to stand up to them. He looked around the kitchen at the assembled staff. How many of you have been mistreated by this man? Screamed at, humiliated, discriminated against? How many of you have wanted to speak up, but were too afraid of losing your jobs? Slowly, hands began to rise. First one, then three, then almost every person in the kitchen except Marcus and two others. Your reign is over, Elijah told Richard. You can leave with dignity now, or I can have security escort you out. Your choice. Richard looked around wildly, seeking support and finding none. Even Marcus had stepped away from him. You can't, the investors. The investors are currently learning exactly how much liability you've exposed them to, Elijah said. Every racist comment, every health code violation, every instance of wage theft. Oh yes, I know about that too. It's all documented. You're done. Richard grabbed a knife from the cutting board, not threateningly, but like he needed something to hold on to. This is my life's work. And look what you did with it, Elijah replied. You had the opportunity to create something beautiful, to nurture talent, to build people up. Instead, you chose pettiness and cruelty. That's on you. The knife clattered to the floor. Richard walked out without another word, pushing past the crowd that had gathered. Marcus started to follow, then stopped, looking back at the kitchen staff he'd terrorized alongside Richard. He began, then stopped. What was there to say? He left too, in silence. David appeared in the doorway, his face gray. Mr. King, the investors have reached a decision. They accept your terms. All of them. All of them. David's voice was hollow. I'll have my resignation on Harold's desk within the hour. Good. Elijah turned to address the kitchen staff. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry that you had to endure this. Sorry that people who should have protected you failed to do so. This restaurant is going to change, starting today. An older prep cook, someone Maya had seen but never really talked to, spoke up. Who's going to run the kitchen? Elijah looked around the room, his eyes settling on the sous chef who'd always stayed quiet during Richard's tirades, who'd helped younger cooks when Richard wasn't looking. What's your name? James Whitman, sir. You want the job? James straightened. Yes, sir. Then it's yours, temporarily. Prove you can run it without the cruelty, and it's yours permanently. As the kitchen slowly returned to work, shocked but functioning, Elijah walked back to the dining room with Maya. The entire restaurant had witnessed the confrontation, either directly or through the open kitchen doors. The atmosphere was electric, transformative. This all happened because of that note you wrote, Elijah told Maya quietly. One small act of courage. I just did what was right, Maya said. Exactly. And that's rarer than it should be. He checked his watch. I have a meeting with my lawyers to formally arrange the purchase of a controlling interest in this place. But I'll be back tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do. As he left, Maya stood in the middle of the dining room she'd served in for 2 years, watching the sunset paint the windows gold. Everything had changed in a matter of days. The old order was crumbling, and something new was being born. James Whitman, the newly appointed head chef, stood with the kitchen staff, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. He'd spent the night redesigning the menu, removing what he called Richard's pretentious garbage and replacing it with food that was elegant but approachable. Maya had seen him still there at midnight when she'd stopped by to grab her forgotten phone, working with a focus that reminded her why she'd always respected him even when he'd stayed silent during Richard's reign. Harold Morrison spotted Maya and gestured her over. "Ms. Thompson, Mr. King has requested you be part of all transition meetings. He'll be here shortly." "Where's David?" someone asked. "Clearing out his office," Harold replied curtly. "He's agreed to make a statement supporting the changes in exchange for certain considerations." Maya knew what that meant, a payoff to go quietly. It made her angry, but she understood the practicality. They needed to stop the bleeding, not create more wounds. Her phone buzzed. "Terrell," Sis saw the news. "Is at your restaurant? Are you okay?" She texted back quickly. "I'm fine. Better than fine. Tell you tonight." At exactly 10 a.m., Elijah walked in. But this time, he wasn't alone. A team of people followed him. Lawyers, accountants, what looked like a documentary filmmaker with a small camera, and surprisingly, Maya's younger brother Terrell. "Terrell," Maya gasped. "What are you doing here? You should be in school." "Mr. King called Mom," Terrell said, his eyes shining with excitement. "Said you were making history and I should see it. Got me excused and everything." Elijah smiled slightly. "I looked into your family after that first night, Maya. Hope you don't mind. Your brother's college essay about you, about watching you face discrimination with dignity, it moved me. Figured he should see what happens when dignity fights back." Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was not the time. "Shall we begin?" Elijah addressed the room. The camera was rolling, she noticed. Everything was being documented. Harold stepped forward. "Mr. King, about the terms." "Have changed," Elijah interrupted. "Last night's video altered things. I'm not buying a controlling interest anymore. I'm buying you out completely." The investors erupted in protests, but Elijah raised a hand. "Check your phones. The offer was sent to your lawyers 10 minutes ago. It's more than fair, considering your alternative is bankruptcy after the lawsuits start rolling in." "What lawsuits?" one investor demanded. Elijah nodded to one of his lawyers, who opened a folder. 17 former employees have agreed to join a class action for systematic discrimination. The EEOC is opening a formal investigation. The health department received an anonymous tip about the violations Richard was bribing them to ignore. They're coming this afternoon. Would you like me to continue? The investors huddled, whispering furiously. Maya watched it all unfold like a movie she couldn't quite believe she was part of. Terrell stood beside her, recording everything on his phone. "This is insane," he whispered to her. "My sister, the revolutionary." "I just wrote a note," Maya whispered back. "Rosa Parks just refused to give up a seat," Terrell replied. "Small actions, big consequences." While the investors deliberated, Elijah addressed the staff. "I want to be clear about something. Anyone who was part of the problem, who actively participated in discrimination, who stood by while others were degraded, you'll be given the opportunity to resign with severance. No public shame, no legal action, just leave. But if you stay, you commit to change. Real change." Bradley was the first to speak up. What if we didn't realize how bad it was? What if we were just going along with? "Then you learn," Elijah said simply. "Everyone gets one chance to grow, but only one." Jennifer raised her hand tentatively. I said things. About you. About other customers. I'm not proud of it. Do you want to do better?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes." "Then stay. Learn. Grow. Prove that people can change." It took 2 hours of negotiation, but eventually, the investors caved. They had no real choice. Elijah had them cornered financially and legally. Papers were signed. Hands were reluctantly shaken. And just like that, Le Bernardin Rouge had a new owner. David emerged from his office with a banker's box of possessions, trying to maintain some dignity as he walked through the dining room one last time. He stopped near Maya. "I suppose you're happy now," he said bitterly. "I'm not happy you lost your job," Maya replied honestly. "I'm happy the culture that made you think you could treat people like garbage is dead." David's face twisted, but before he could respond, Elijah appeared. "Mr. Hartley, a word." They stepped aside, and Maya heard Elijah say, quietly, "I know about the kickbacks from suppliers. The money you've been skimming." Maya thought for a moment, then said that everybody deserves to be treated with dignity. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you wear, where you come from. Basic human respect shouldn't be a luxury item. Sandra nodded, scribbling in her notepad. "And what about Elijah King? What do you think of him?" Maya looked across the room at Elijah, who was currently showing a young server how to properly pour wine, his expensive suit jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up. "I think he's proof that power doesn't have to corrupt," she said. "That sometimes the right person gets the resources to make real change." As if he'd heard her, Elijah looked up and caught her eye. He raised his water glass in a small toast, and she nodded back. That evening, as the last customers were leaving, Elijah called an all-staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the dining room, exhausted but energized. "Today was messy," he said. "Tomorrow will be better. And the day after that, better still. We're going to make mistakes, face resistance, probably lose some customers who preferred the old way. But we're also going to build something special. A place where talent matters more than skin color. Where respect is the baseline, not the exception." He turned to Maya. "I'm promoting you to general manager, effective immediately. The salary is double what David was making." Maya's knees nearly buckled. I don't have experience." "You have integrity," Elijah countered. "You have courage. You have the respect of the staff. Everything else can be learned." The room burst into applause. Jamal was grinning. James was nodding approvingly. And even some of the servers who'd been part of the old guard were clapping. "This is just the beginning," Elijah continued. "Tomorrow, the real work starts." The next morning arrived with a media storm. Sandra Palmer's initial article had dropped online at midnight, and by dawn, Le Bernardin Rouge was trending on every social media platform. The headline read, "The Billionaire in the Hoodie, How Elijah King Exposed Fine Dining's Ugly Secret." Maya arrived at 6 a.m. to find Elijah already there, sitting in the kitchen with James, planning the day's menu. He'd brought coffee and pastries from a local black-owned bakery, a deliberate statement that wasn't lost on anyone. "Morning, General Manager," he greeted her. The title still felt surreal. "Morning. The phone's been ringing off the hook. 3 news stations want interviews, and we have more reservation requests than we can handle." "Good problems to have," Elijah said. "But we need to be strategic. This attention won't last forever. We need to cement change while eyes are on us." A commotion outside made them all look up. Through the windows, they could see protesters gathering, but not protesting against them. They carried signs reading "Dignity for All" and "End Restaurant Racism." Among them, Maya spotted several former employees who'd been driven out by David and Richard over the years. "Should we do something?" James asked. "Yes," Elijah said, standing. "We invite them in for coffee." The gesture made headlines within hours. Photos of Elijah and Maya serving coffee to protesters, of former victims of discrimination being welcomed back into the space that had rejected them, spread like wildfire. But not everyone was celebrating. Around 10 a.m., a group of the restaurant's old regulars arrived, led by the diamond-wearing woman who'd sneered at Elijah on a second visit. Her name, Maya learned, was Patricia Ashford, wife of a hedge fund manager and queen bee of a certain social set. "This is disgusting," Patricia announced loudly, surveying the diverse crowd in the dining room. "This used to be a respectable establishment. It's under new management," Maya said calmly, approaching her. "Would you like a table?" "I wouldn't eat here if you paid me," Patricia spat. "None of us would." She gestured to her group, about 15 people, all radiating the same entitled disgust. "That's your choice," Maya replied. "But discrimination is no longer on the menu here." Patricia's face went red. "Discrimination? We're the ones being discriminated against. This was our place, your segregated playground. Elijah appeared, his presence immediately commanding attention. The documentary filmmaker was right behind him, camera rolling. Patricia seemed to recognize him from the news. Mr. King, surely you understand that certain establishments cater to certain clientele. I understand that you're upset about having to share space with people you consider beneath you, Elijah said calmly. But that era is over. At least in my restaurant. Your restaurant? A man from Patricia's group scoffed. You can buy the building, but you can't buy class. No, Elijah agreed. Class is earned through how you treat others. And by that measure, you're bankrupt. The confrontation was being filmed by multiple patrons now. Patricia seemed to realize she was on the losing side of public opinion. This won't last, she hissed. People like you always overreach. You'll be gone in 6 months, and things will go back to normal. We'll see, Elijah said mildly. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Patricia and her group stormed out, but their departure felt like a victory. The old guard was retreating. The lunch service was even busier than the day before. Maya found herself managing controlled chaos. But it was a good chaos. Servers learning new rhythms. Customers excited to be part of something changing. James's kitchen producing food that was both excellent and accessible. Around 2 p.m., a group of men in expensive suits entered. Unlike Patricia's crowd, these men moved with purpose. Maya recognized one of them. Robert Sterling, CEO of one of the largest restaurant conglomerates in the country. Mr. King, Sterling said, extending his hand to Elijah. I think we should talk. They took a corner table, and Maya couldn't help but position herself nearby, refilling water glasses that didn't need refilling. You've created quite a stir, Sterling said. The whole industry is watching. Good, Elijah replied. They should be. You realize you're making enemies. Powerful ones. The old guard doesn't appreciate being called out. The old guard can adapt or become extinct. Sterling leaned forward. What if I told you I agree with you? What if I said my company wants to be on the right side of this change? Elijah studied him. I'd say prove it. We want to partner with you. Use Loup Bernardin Rouge as a model. Implement your practices across our chain. 300 restaurants nationwide. The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Maya held her breath. On one condition, Elijah said. Maya Thompson leads the initiative. She's the one who started this. She should be the one to spread it. Maya nearly dropped the water pitcher. Sterling's eyes shifted to her, evaluating. She's young, inexperienced and corporate. She's principled, brave, and she understands what needs to change from the ground up. Elijah's tone brooked no argument. That's my condition. Sterling extended his hand to Maya. Ms. Thompson, how would you like to revolutionize American dining? Before Maya could respond, a disturbance erupted in the kitchen. They could hear shouting, then a crash. Everyone rushed toward the sound. In the kitchen, they found Richard. He'd somehow gotten past the changed locks, and he stood there wild-eyed, holding a baseball bat, with several smashed plates around him. You destroyed everything, he screamed at Elijah. My reputation, my career, everything. You destroyed those things yourself, Elijah said calmly, though Maya noticed he'd positioned himself between Richard and the staff. I just exposed them. I'll sue you. You'll leave, Elijah said. Now, or I call the police and add breaking and entering to your problems. Richard raised the bat, and for a moment, Maya thought he might actually swing it. But then James stepped forward, along with several other kitchen staff Richard had terrorized for years. You heard him, James said quietly. Leave. Faced with his former victims standing united against him, Richard's rage crumbled into something pathetic. He dropped the bat and fled, pushing past the gathered crowd. They later learned he'd left the state entirely, his reputation so thoroughly destroyed that no restaurant would hire him. As the kitchen staff cleaned up the broken dishes, Sterling said quietly to Elijah, You sure you want to take on this fight? People like Richard don't usually go quietly. They do when they have no choice, Elijah replied. And we're going to make sure they have no choice. The rest of the day proceeded with an electric energy. Word of the partnership offer had spread among the staff, and everyone seemed to stand a little taller, work a little harder. This wasn't just about one restaurant anymore. It was about changing an entire industry. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Elijah called Maya to his temporary office, formerly David's. "I need you to understand something," he said. "If you take Sterling's offer, you'll be in the spotlight. Every mistake will be magnified, every success questioned. There will be people who want you to fail just to prove that the old way was better." "I know," Maya said, "but someone has to do it. It doesn't have to be you. You could stay here, run this place, have a comfortable life." Maya thought about Terrell, about all the young black kids who'd been told they didn't belong in certain spaces. "Yes, it does have to be me, because I know what it's like to be on the other side of that discrimination. I know what needs to change." Elijah smiled. "That's what I hoped you'd say." He pulled out a folder. "Sterling's offer is real, but I want you to have options. I'm also offering you a position with King Enterprises. Same role, revolutionizing our restaurant holdings. Your choice. What's the difference? With Sterling, you'll have more reach, but less autonomy. With me, you'll have complete freedom, but a smaller platform, at least initially." Maya stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Two paths forward, both leading toward the same goal, a world where dignity wasn't negotiable. "Can I think about it? Take all the time you need." "But Maya," Elijah stood, joining her at the window. "Whatever you choose, know that you've already changed things. That note you wrote, it was the first domino. Everything else is just momentum." As Maya left that evening, she found Terrell waiting for her outside. "So," he asked eagerly, "what happens next?" "We keep pushing," Maya said. "We keep changing things. We keep proving that everyone deserves a seat at the table. Including us. Especially us." They walked together toward the subway, past the protesters who'd become supporters, past the news vans still camping out for the next development, past the old customers who'd never return and the new ones who'd never felt welcome before. The revolution wasn't over. In many ways, it had just begun. But for the first time in her life, Maya felt like she had the power to actually change things. And she intended to use it. 3 weeks had passed since Elijah King took over Loup Bernardin Rouge, and the reverberations were still being felt throughout the restaurant industry. Maya stood in her new office. She still couldn't quite believe she had an office, reviewing the latest sales figures. They were up 40%, with reservations booked solid for the next 2 months. But success had brought new challenges. That morning, she'd arrived to find graffiti spray painted across the restaurant's windows. "In Lover Establishment," in blood-red letters. Security footage showed 3 men in masks, but the police seemed remarkably uninterested in pursuing it. "They're testing us," Elijah said, studying the footage on his laptop, "seeing if pressure will make us back down." "Will it?" Maya asked, though she already knew his answer. "What do you think?" Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was her mother, and she sounded panicked. "Maya, baby, there were men here, asking questions about you, about Terrell. They said they were reporters, but something felt wrong." Maya's blood chilled. "What kind of questions?" "About your past, any trouble you might have been in, any debts." "Baby, what's going on?" Elijah took the phone from Maya's trembling hand. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Elijah King. I'm sending security to your home right now. Don't answer the door for anyone else." After he hung up, Elijah's expression was grim. "They're trying to find leverage. Something to discredit you. But I haven't done anything. Doesn't matter. They'll manufacture something if they have to." He pulled out his phone, making rapid calls to his security team and lawyers. "We're moving your family to a secure location until this blows over." That afternoon, the manufactured scandal broke. A gossip blog published a story claiming Maya had been fired from a previous job for theft, a complete fabrication, but with documents that looked convincing. Within hours, it was trending on social media. Patricia Ashford appeared on a local news station, crocodile tears in her eyes. "We always knew something was off about that girl." But Elijah King was so blinded by his agenda that he put a criminal in charge. Maya watched in horror as her reputation was shredded in real time. Comment sections filled with racist vitriol, death threats appeared in her inbox, and even some of the restaurant's new supporters began questioning whether they'd been deceived. "We fight back," Elijah said firmly. We have the truth on our side. The truth doesn't trend as well as lies, Maya said bitterly. But Elijah was already in motion. Within hours, he'd assembled a press conference. Not at some hotel, but right in the dining room of Le Bernardin Rouge, with the staff assembled behind them in a show of solidarity. Let me be clear, Elijah began, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people stop scrolling and listen. Maya Thompson is being targeted because she dared to stand up to discrimination. Every accusation against her is false, and we have the evidence to prove it. He produced records from Maya's previous employer, glowing recommendations, security footage that proved she'd been home the night she was supposedly committing theft. His lawyers had worked at superhuman speed to gather everything. But more than that, Elijah continued. Even if Maya had made mistakes in her past, which she hasn't, would that invalidate what she's fighting for now? Are we so afraid of change that will destroy anyone who champions it? The press conference helped, but the damage was partially done. That evening, several reserve parties canceled. 2 servers quit, afraid of being associated with controversy. James stood firm in the kitchen, but Maya could see the strain on everyone's faces. That night, alone in her office, Maya finally broke down. Elijah found her there, crying silently at her desk. "I can't do this," she whispered. "They're going after my family. They're destroying everything I've worked for." Elijah sat across from her. "You want to know why I started doing this? Going to restaurants incognito, exposing discrimination." Maya looked up, wiping her eyes. "I grew up in Compton," he said. "Single mom, 3 kids, food stamps. When I was 16, I saved for months to take my girlfriend to a fancy restaurant for prom. We got dressed up, felt like royalty, and they turned us away at the door. Said they were fully booked, even though I could see empty tables." He paused, lost in the memory. "I made my first million by 25. Went back to that same restaurant, dressed the same way. They turned me away again. That's when I realized it was never about money. It was about power, about keeping people in their place. So you fought back. I learned to fight smart. They want you to quit, Maya. Because if you succeed, if you prove that change is possible, their whole world order crumbles. That's why they're attacking so hard." Maya steadied herself. "My mama didn't raise a quitter." No, she didn't. The next morning brought unexpected support. Sterling returned with a team of lawyers. "Nobody attacks my future business partners without going through me," he declared. He'd brought a forensic accounting team that quickly proved the theft allegations were fabricated, and his media connections started pushing back against the narrative. Then came the surprise reinforcement. A group of black restaurant workers from across the city marched to Le Bernardin Rouge in solidarity. They carried signs, "Maya Thompson speaks for us," and "End kitchen racism now." The crowd grew throughout the day. Former employees who'd been discriminated against, young culinary students who saw hope in Maya's story, even some white industry veterans who'd stayed silent too long but wanted to support change. By afternoon, the street outside was packed. News crews arrived to cover what was becoming a movement. Inside, Maya and the staff served free coffee and sandwiches to the protesters, turning what could have been a crisis into a celebration. That's when David Hartley made his last, desperate play. He appeared on a conservative podcast, claiming he was the real victim. "I gave that girl a chance," he said, oozing false sincerity. "And she conspired with Elijah King to steal my livelihood. This is what happens when you try to help these people." The mask had fully slipped. The naked racism of his comments shocked even some who'd been sympathetic to him. But David wasn't done. He announced he was suing for wrongful termination and defamation, seeking $50 million. "Let him," Elijah said when he heard. "Discovery will be very interesting when we present all the evidence of his embezzlement." But the lawsuit had its intended effect. It scared investors. Sterling called an emergency meeting. "My board is nervous," he admitted. "They're wondering if this partnership is worth the controversy." "So you're backing out?" Maya asked, surprised by how steady her voice was. "I'm giving you one last chance to prove this can work. Tomorrow night, we're bringing my top executives, major food critics, industry leaders. Show them that this new model isn't just sustainable. It's profitable and popular." It was an impossible challenge. They had less than 36 hours to prepare for the most important service of their lives. "We'll be ready," Maya said. As Sterling left, Elijah pulled her aside. "You don't have to do this. We can build slowly without Sterling." "No," Maya said firmly. "They want us to retreat, to take the small victory and be quiet. I'm done being quiet." That night, the entire staff stayed late, preparing. James worked on a menu that would showcase both excellence and accessibility. Jamal drilled the service team on perfect synchronization. Even Bradley and Jennifer, who'd been part of the old problematic culture, worked with desperate determination to prove they'd changed. But the biggest surprise came when Harold Morrison walked in at midnight. "I know I have no right to be here," he said, looking older and tired. "But I've been thinking about what Elijah said, about seeing discrimination and doing nothing. I want to help." Maya was skeptical, but Elijah studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I have a granddaughter," Harold said quietly. "She's mixed race. Her mother is black. And I realized the world I've been maintaining is one where she wouldn't be welcome. I can't live with that." He offered his connections, his influence with critics and industry leaders. It was a risk trusting him, but they needed every advantage. The day of the crucial service dawned gray and raining. Maya arrived to find more graffiti, more protesters, but this time they were supporters, forming a human chain around the restaurant to protect it from any disruption. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Every surface gleamed. Every staff member moved with purpose. Maya did final checks, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hands. "You've got this," Elijah told her. "Whatever happens, you've already won. You've changed things." "Not enough," Maya replied. "Not yet." The doors opened at 6 p.m. sharp. Sterling arrived first with his executives, 12 people who collectively controlled thousands of restaurants. Then came the critics, including James Beard Award winners who could make or break a restaurant with a single review. Industry leaders, celebrity chefs, and food bloggers filled the remaining seats. But Maya had insisted on something else. Regular tables would still be available for walk-ins. This wasn't going to be an exclusive event. It was going to be proof that excellence and inclusivity could coexist. A black family of 4 was seated next to Sterling's table. A young Latino couple sat beside the James Beard critics. An elderly Asian woman dining alone was given the same attention as the celebrity chef at the window table. "Brave choice," Sterling murmured to Maya as she greeted him. "It's not brave," she replied. "It's the whole point." The first courses emerged from James's kitchen with military precision. Each dish was perfect, but approachable, elevated comfort food that spoke to diverse palates without pandering. The service, led by Jamal, was flawless but warm, professional without being stuffy. Maya watched from her position by the host stand, orchestrating everything with subtle signals and quiet authority. She'd learned from watching years of management, but she brought something David never had: genuine care for both staff and customers. Midway through the service, there was a disturbance outside. Patricia Ashford had arrived with a group of protesters, holding signs that read "Save Fine Dining" and "Standards Matter." They tried to push past the human chain of supporters. "Ignore them," Elijah advised. But Maya had a different idea. She grabbed a tray of the evening's appetizers and walked outside, offering them to Patricia's group. "You're welcome to join us inside," she said calmly, as news cameras captured the moment. "Everyone is welcome." Patricia slapped the tray from her hands, food scattering across the sidewalk. The violence of the gesture, captured from multiple angles, would later go viral. The perfect symbol of the old guard's desperate cruelty. Maya simply smiled. "The offer stands." She walked back inside to thunderous applause from the supporters. The moment shifted everything. Inside, Sterling's executives were nodding approvingly. The critics were taking copious notes. Even the celebrity chef, known for his harsh judgments, was smiling. As the main courses were served, Harold Morrison stood up. Maya tensed, unsure what he was about to do. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice carrying across the dining room. "For years, I profited from discrimination while telling myself I wasn't responsible. I was wrong. What's happening here? This is what restaurants should be. What America should be. He raised his glass to Maya, to the young woman who had the courage to write a note that changed everything. The room erupted in applause. Even some of Sterling's more skeptical executives were clapping. The evening continued with an almost magical quality. Every dish was perfect, every interaction smooth. But more than that, there was joy in the air, the kind that comes when people feel genuinely welcomed rather than merely tolerated. A young black girl at one of the walk-in tables approached Maya shyly. "My mom says you're the boss here." "I'm one of them," Maya said, kneeling to the girl's level. "Can I be a boss like you someday?" "You can be anything you want," Maya told her. "And don't let anyone tell you different." The girl's mother had tears in her eyes. She's never seen someone who looks like her in charge at a place like this. She will now, Maya promised. More and more. As dessert was being served, Elijah got a call. His expression shifted as he listened. Then he pulled Maya aside. "David's dead," he said quietly. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. "What? How? Quel accident?" "He was drunk, hit a tree. No one else was hurt." Maya felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for a wasted life. Relief that his threats were over. Guilt for feeling that relief. "Don't announce it tonight," Elijah advised. "This is your moment." As the evening wound down, Sterling approached with his executives. "Well, Miss Thompson, you've made believers of us all. So, the partnership is on? More than that, we want to expand it. Not just implementing your practices, but creating a training program. The Maya Thompson Institute for Restaurant Excellence and Equality." Maya nearly fainted. "The what?" "You'll oversee it. Train the next generation of restaurant managers and owners in inclusive practices. We're prepared to fund it with $20 million to start." The executives nodded in agreement. One of them, an older white woman, said, "What we saw tonight, the diversity, the joy, the excellence, that's the future. And we'd be fools not to invest in it." As the VIP guests departed, the regular diners remained, savoring their desserts and the atmosphere. The protesters outside had long since given up, overwhelmed by the supporters who'd started an impromptu celebration in the street. Sandra Palmer, the food critic who'd been there from nearly the beginning, pulled Maya aside. "My review publishes tomorrow. I just wanted you to know, it's not just a rave. I'm calling this the most important restaurant story of the decade. You've started a revolution." "Elijah started it," Maya corrected. "No," Sandra said. "He provided the resources. You provided the courage. That note you wrote, that was the spark." As the last customers left, the staff gathered in the dining room. They were exhausted, but exhilarated. James emerged from the kitchen to thunderous applause. Jamal was lifted on shoulders like a conquering hero. Even Bradley and Jennifer, who'd started as part of the problem, were embraced by the team. Elijah called for attention. "I have an announcement. I'm promoting Jamal to Director of Operations. James will become Executive Chef with full creative control. And Bradley and Jennifer, who've shown that people can genuinely change. You'll be training our new servers in inclusive service standards." "What about you?" someone asked Maya. "Are you leaving for Sterling's program?" Maya looked around the room at the faces that had become family. "I'll run the Institute, but Le Bernardin Rouge will always be home base. This is where it started. This is where we proved it could work." Besides, Elijah added, "I'm making Maya a full partner in the restaurant. 25% ownership." Maya's knees buckled. Jamal caught her laughing. "Easy there, partner." As the celebration continued, Maya stepped outside for air. The rain had stopped, and the city sparkled with lights. Terrell was waiting for her, having watched the whole evening from a corner table where he'd been doing homework. "So sis," he said, grinning, "how does it feel to change the world?" "Like it's just beginning," Maya said. Elijah joined them, looking out at the city. "You know they'll keep fighting US. Patricia Ashford types don't give up easily." "Let them come," Maya said. "We've got something they don't." "What's that?" "The future on our side." A week later, Le Bernardin Rouge held its official relaunch under the new model. The reservation list included senators, celebrities, and industry titans, but also teachers, firefighters, and families who'd never thought they'd be welcome in such a space. Maya stood at the entrance, greeting each guest personally. She wore the same simple black dress she'd worn as a server, though now with a manager's pin that Elijah had designed, a golden pin symbolizing the note that started everything. The documentary filmmaker who'd been following the story approached her. Last question for the film. If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, the attacks, the threats, the pain, would you still write that note? Maya didn't hesitate. Every single time. Even knowing about David, Maya's expression sobered. David made his choices. I made mine. Ich chose tous. He chose hate. We all have to live, or die, with our choices. As the evening began, Elijah raised a glass to the assembled crowd. 6 weeks ago, a server in this restaurant risked everything to tell me I was being served leftover food because of the color of my skin. That single act of courage started an avalanche. Tonight, we celebrate not just a new beginning for this restaurant, but for our entire industry. He turned to Maya, to the woman who reminded us that dignity isn't negotiable, that respect isn't optional, and that courage is contagious. Maya Thompson. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya stood there, surrounded by supporters, thinking about how a simple note had transformed into a movement. She thought about her mother, safe now and proud, about Terrell, who'd already written his college essay about watching his sister change history, about all the young black kids who would grow up in a world with slightly more open doors because she dared to speak up. As the celebration continued around her, Maya pulled out a small notepad, the same kind she'd used to warn Elijah. She wrote, "This is just the beginning." She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. A reminder, a promise, a revolution that started with a note and would continue until every person, regardless of race or class or background, could walk through any door and be treated with dignity. The camera pulled back, showing Loup Bernardin Rouge alive with diverse faces, laughter, and hope. Through the windows, the city sparkled with possibility. And somewhere in that light, the future was being rewritten, one restaurant, one policy, one brave act at a time. What small act of courage have you been holding back from? And what revolution might it start if you finally found the voice to speak up? If Maya's story inspired you to stand for what's right, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of ordinary people who changed everything with extraordinary courage.